must do. This is our mission, to make sure human beings are not tripping on their own feet.
Back to karma theory, Sadhguru. With the progress in medical sciences, the life expectancy of every individual is increasing, but the pain, diseases, and medical sufferings are also increasing day by day. Do we call this karma that we have to suffer in the human life? Why do some small infants suffer from such dreaded diseases? Or is it punishment of my past karma? Why should one stay on even after completing one's responsibilities, which usually ends when children find their jobs and settle down?
Oh, don't do that, please. These days children find jobs by 18, 20. Well, first of all, karma is not a theory, and it is not a punishment and reward system in the world. Karma is a self-recording process. Every experience that happens to you, every perception that you have, this system goes on recording so that a large part of your life need not be thought through every moment. A large part of it, which is motor functions and physical world, can be handled automatically. When I say automatically, see for example, you can walk. But do you remember when you were probably 18, 20 months old, when you tried to walk, how difficult it was? Because on two legs, walking on a round planet when the planet is spinning like this is not an easy thing to do. If you look at the physical laws involved in walking, a human being walking on two legs, it is too complex. If you try to understand it, it's an enormous amount of physics, it's crazy. But today, you can just get up and walk without thinking. But if you start thinking, okay, I must put the right leg first, then the left leg, left leg, you will be confused, you won't know how to walk. So walking is not a simple thing, it's a phenomena actually. Walking on two legs, because as far as nature is concerned, to put a four-legged animal on two legs, it took millions of years of research and development. You can call this evolution, but essentially it's research and development. Creation is doing research and development on this planet to put a four-legged animal on two legs, you know how long it took. But today you can just do it effortlessly because all your life you've done it. So, karma, this is all karma. There is genetic memory, there is evolutionary memory, there is conscious and unconscious levels of memory, articulate and inarticulate levels of memory. So this whole body is memory, all right? See, right now, you may not remember how your great-great-great-grandfather looked like, let's say 10 generations ago. But his nose may be sitting on your face right now, exactly like that. Your skin color, the skin tone, how your forefathers were 1,000 years ago, your epithelial cells still remember. No way to confuse them. So, this what you call as myself, this whole framework of a human being is a consequence of a certain amalgamation of memory. So these memories are allowing you to function, this is your karma. Without this memory, you wouldn't know one thing from the other, all right? You just wouldn't know one thing from the other. So karma is not a concept, karma is not a punishment and reward system. It is just that you exist only because of your karma. But it is like you build a karmic stage upon which you're supposed to do your drama. But if your karmic stage is not firm, if it is like quicksands, now you try to dance on it, you will sink into it. This is all the problem is. Your karma is not conscious, it is simply happening in a compulsive and instinctive manner. This simply means your research and development that's gone into you, you're wasting. If you are any other creature, you functioning instinctively and compulsively was all right. Once you become human, you are supposed to function intelligently and consciously. For any human being, this is important in every aspect of life, but particularly for a soldier, it is super important because it's question of life and death, that you are conscious and you function intelligently. You don't do compulsive, reactive things because then you will do what your enemy wants you to do. Very easily they can get you into a reaction. So this is extremely important for all aspects of life. Karma is not a problem. You exist because of your karma. You don't suffer because of your karma. You suffer because you react to the karma. Or you're reacting to your own karma or you're reacting to somebody else's karma. It is in reaction that you suffer. See, there are only two kinds of suffering, physical suffering and mental suffering. As soldiers, you might have witnessed, even when there is grievous injuries, certain men don't suffer, they're still on. Not that there is no pain, there is enormous pain, because physical pain is one thing, multiplying that in your mind is called suffering. Physical pain is very important for our survival. If there was no physical pain, we wouldn't protect our body, we would rip it apart. So physical pain is an essential part of our survival process, but suffering is a psychological reaction to either physiological situation or social situations around us. So karma is not the problem, karma is vital for your existence. You are an individual only because of your karmic matter. Karma does not mean good and bad, it is just memory. It is things that have already happened. Is yesterday good or bad? There is no such thing because it's not alive. Only if it's alive and it can bite you, you can say it's good or bad. But what is dead and gone, if you react to it, even today it seems to bite you and hurt you, because what happened 10 years ago, people still suffer. What may happen day after tomorrow, they already suffer. So what happened 10 years ago is not alive right now. What may happen day after tomorrow cannot be alive right now because it's not happened. So you're essentially suffering that which does not exist. This is why karma is important. You understand your joy is also your karma, your misery is also your karma, your suffering is also your karma. Karma means you are doing it. Karma means action. When you say, my life is my karma, you are admitting, my life is my making. This is the most dynamic way to exist. This is the only culture on the planet who has looked life like this. A whole lot of cultures believe that their life is managed from somewhere above. But from up there, somebody is managing. But we are sitting on a round planet which is spinning all the time. You don't even know which is up and which is down. In this cosmos, is it somewhere marked this side up and this side down? There is no such thing. You do not even know what is up and down. How come you know who is up there or who is down there? So these are childish, soulish that you create in your mind. Karma is a very dynamic, adult way of looking at life. This is my making. Right now, I am joyful, this is my making. Right now, I am miserable, this is my making. Right now, I am the way I am, this is entirely my making. When you say, my life is my karma, you are saying, my life is entirely my making. This is the most dynamic way to exist. Do not make it fatalistic, it is nothing fatalistic about it, because if you see it's my making, you can fix it. If it is God's making, you cannot fix it. That's a big difference.
Moving to greener pastures, Sadhguru, having read your thoughts about golf, can you share your
Well, green is not a color, it's a destination.
So, can you please share your inner engineering tips for combating adversities on the golf course?
There are no adversities on the golf course because this is not an artillery thing. Nobody is trying to hit you with the ball. See, golf is a game unlike any other game because I played a lot of field hockey when I was young. There was only one ball. 20 of us are trying to grab that ball. And it's moving at high speeds and you have to grab it and take it, but everybody wants the same ball. When I started golf, when I was well over 50 years of age, I suddenly realized this is a great game, I have my own ball. And nobody's trying to grab it, and I have all the time to hit it, and it's a sitting ball. In every other game, ball is coming at you at various angles, velocities, spin, speed, all kinds of things. Here, it is a sitting ball, and everybody becomes quiet in respect for the goof-up that you may do. So, to hit a sitting ball, what is the big challenge, I thought. So I never took a lesson, I never been on a driving range. It's a sitting ball, I never take a practice swing in the entire 18 holes, but it's a sitting ball. If your faculties are okay, if you're reasonably geometrically well balanced when you stand, you can hit the ball. You may not become a pro, but reasonable level of golf, every reasonably fit man or woman can play. But unfortunately, they have a mental problem. In my understanding of the game, 70% of the game is in the mind. So I play only 70%. The other 30% I never bothered, because I don't want to be a professional or be in a competition or something. So I only play 70% of the golf. So I finish, 5, 6, 7 over. It's okay with me, I am not planning to go under, so it's okay.
While we deal with difficult relationships where one cannot avoid the other person, be it the boss or your wife, more often than not, I feel out of control and the whole environment seems to be conniving against me. Can I deal with the situation on my own? Is it okay to blame somebody else? What do you suggest is the way to get back to life in a positive way?
See, the best thing about this is, you're only facing one of them, either boss or the wife, never two of them together. So, you can oscillate, As a military man, you can escape the wife for some time and you can escape the boss for some time, unlike other jobs where every day they have to face. I'm sorry, I'm just joking like this Anyway, see, you can neither live without your wife nor your boss. Both are important in your life. You sought the career and you got into the job, you got a boss. You sought relationship, you got into marriage and you got a wife. So these are things that you aspired for. When things that you aspire for happen, then you suffer. This must be looked at. This is not about the wife, this is not about the boss. This is something to do with yourself, because human beings have gotten into this place, wherever you place them, they have found a way to suffer. Why are you guys so serious? Come on.
So I think we are wearing masks, that's why probably…
Oh, I'm not able to see you smile I'm sorry, but I thought I will hear some laughter at least, so let me tell you a joke. This happened. One day, Shankaran Pillai had a mega fight with his wife. Then in a fit of fury, he left the home and walked away in the evening. He loitered here and there just outside the town, he was moving around not knowing where to go, what to do. Going back home immediately was not palatable. Then he saw a sadhu, a sannyasi was settling down beneath the tree for the evening or the night. He looked at him and he seemed to be very well organized and absolutely no issues. Under the tree, he seems to be perfectly fine. Then he went to him and said, "Sadhu Maharaj, बीवी बहुत परेशान दे रहा है, कुछ सुलभ उपाय है तो बोलो." The sadhu glared at him like this, "बेवकूफ, सुलभ उपाय है तो मैं क्यों साधु बन के यहाँ बैठ रहा हूँ?" So, see, we say this, like life is like juggling a ball. If you're alone, just one ball, easy to do. You become two balls, little more difficult, needs more attention. Then you become four, you have 4 balls to juggle. Then you have an Indian army on you, you have 10,000 balls to juggle, or do you? So, how many balls can you juggle joyfully? That's how many you should pick up. If you aspire or enhance your activity without enhancing yourself, activity will cause misery. So people, one top executive in the country of an international company, a global CEO, came to me some time ago and in a deep state of distress. and said, Sadhguru, I can't take this, they're putting so much stress on me. I looked at him and said, okay then, may you be fired. He said, no, Sadhguru, what are you saying? I said, hey, you're suffering your job so much. I'm sure there are many people who are aspiring for your job. If you get fired, you can walk the beach happily. No, Sadhguru, don't do that to me. So if you're in the job, you'll suffer. You'll get fired if you suffer. If you're married, if you suffer. Married, if you suffer, you will suffer. If you're if you're not married, you suffer. What is the problem? The problem is this one. Not with the wife, not with the boss, not with the world. Whatever they may be, I'm not trying to defend them. They may be anything. But whether I suffer or don't suffer is essentially with me. As I said earlier, what the world throws at you is not your choice. What you make out of it is 100% your choice. This is what karma means. When I say my life is my karma, wife is somehow, boss is somehow, the world around you is somehow, all kinds of nuisance happening. But I keep this one the way I want. You may I know you face different kind of enemy, but we face all kinds of people every day. People that I've never met, that I do not know, they have they're spewing venom on me on daily basis. I don't know from where that venom comes, maybe it's just extra protein in their body, I don't know. But they go on endlessly, doing all kinds of things, putting all kinds of obstacles to everything that we do. Everything that we do is inclusive for larger well-being, but they don't like it. There are people campaigning right now against me today that tree planting is dangerous. Okay. Your existence itself is dangerous. So, what people do to you, what the world does to you, this is how it is. What do you want to do to yourself? That is in your hands. This is your karma. This is what it means by saying, my life is my karma, means the way I am is 100% mine, nobody. Nobody can decide how I will be right now. It's me who decides how I am right now. If you decide how you are right now, will you keep yourself blissful or miserable? If you can answer this one question, all of you.
Sadhguru, how do you relate the concept of Shiva and yoga?
Well, right now most people's understanding of Shiva is from the calendar images. These days I see particularly, I think it's both North India and South India, but I think it's more in the north. They are making Shiva look like a chubby, sweet-looking man, okay? No mustache, no beard, nothing, sweet-looking baby-like man. No, if you look at the stories, he is one of the most athletic gods that you can think of. And above all, wherever you see him, he is sitting in yogic postures, he is the yogi, he is a yogi and he is the first yogi. So the reason why we remember people for thousands of years is because of their contribution to us. See, we must understand, all of us are self-centered human beings. Right now, we will remember somebody with great affection, love or devotion simply because of the contributions they've made to our lives. Along with Shiva, many others might have lived on this planet, but who cares whether they existed or not? We don't think about them, it's only a few human beings that we revere because of the contributions he has made to us. What is his contribution, Adiyogi's contribution to us? Because he was a yogi and people had never seen one like that before, they called him Adiyogi or the first yogi. So what is his contribution? His contribution is he explored the mechanics of life like it has never been done before, nor has it been done after. 112 ways in which a human being can attain to the highest, ultimate level of liberation and well-being within oneself. 112 different ways of exploration. So these 112 ways were taught to the 7 yogis who are today being referred to as the Saptarishis and also Devi Parvati. These were the 8 people who became beneficiaries of this knowledge. From there, it has come down with various distortions and various interpretations, but fundamentally the science of yoga. What the science of yoga means is, see, he is like over 15,000 years ago, but probably only now, for the first time, the world is getting ready for him. So Adi Yogi is not of the past, he is of the future. Why I am saying this is, today you are here and many of you have children. You clearly know that with your children, unless you say something logically sensible, they are not willing to take it from you. Even if you happen to be a very loving, doting parent, still they don't take it from you. Is that so? Are you seeing this? Because for the first time in the history of humanity, the human intellect is more cultivated in maximum number of people than ever before. This is the first time that such a large percentage of humanity is beginning to think logically, otherwise it all went by belief. So only when people start thinking logically and looking at life logically, a scientific approach to human well-being is a possibility. Otherwise, the way we have handled our well-being is by looking up. So you look up and think something will come from there and make you well. When it doesn't work, people will say, don't worry, you will go to heaven and there everything will be well. Now you ask the youth, do they want to go to heaven? They don't want to go to heaven, it's a very sensible population. For the first time, we understand that this is the place to live, not another place, somewhere else. The idea that there is a better place to live elsewhere than this itself is a crime. This is the place to live. And how do you know, what proof do you have that this is not heaven? This is heaven, but you're messing it up. So a time has come when everything has to be logically correct. That means instead of handling our well-being through belief system, through philosophy, through ideology, through all kinds of cranky things, now we have come to a time where we want to address our well-being in a scientific manner with tools and technologies for well-being. This is what he gave over 15,000 years ago. But all these years, all we did was largely, not everybody, there has been a whole yogic culture in this country. It is only in the last 500 years it's kind of diminished. But except for a segment of the population, all others just worshipped him. He did not ask for worship. He did not behave in such a way that he demands worship. He is simply there, giving these tools for transformation. For those who used it, it worked. So a time has come where populations on the planet are more ready for a scientific approach to human well-being and using technologies for well-being. Time has come, so in many ways, Adi Yogi or Shiva is not of the past, he is of the future, because it is not a philosophy, it is not an ideology, it's not a belief system, these are technologies for well-being. And this is definitely the way for the future generations, everywhere in the world.
Though we would have wished this fascinating evening to continue, Sadhguru, we are cognitive of the time constraints. I now request Air Vice Marshal Pavan Mohe to kindly deliver the vote of thanks.
Namaskaram, sir. It's an honor to be with you. I mean, you're a hugely decorated officer. Namaskaram to you.
Namaskaram to you, sir. Respected Sadhguru, first of all, on behalf of the entire CDM fraternity, I wish to express my profound gratitude to Sadhguru for taking time out to speak to us. It's indeed a rare honor and a proud privilege to have hosted you this evening, though in the virtual mode. The great strength of this teaching is the idea that we can train our minds to turn these unfavorable circumstances around and make them work to our advantage. Once again, I thank you, Sadhguru, for having enlightened our minds. We should cherish this interaction and look forward to hosting you in CDM campus again. Jai Hind.
Namaskaram.
So, clapping for the